Hello everyone, this is Michael from Blue Sky Bio. I was recently contacted by a dentist who made a comment, hey, wouldn't it be great if BlueSkyPlan allowed you to design a crown and a bridge directly in the software? And my response, of course, was it does. So I'm creating this video to demonstrate some of the functionality. We're going to create some crowns for titanium-based sky abutments, and we can create a bridge out of that as well. I am going to demonstrate the functionality using BlueSkyPlan version 4.9.4. If you're using an older version, then download an update from our website, or simply go to help, check for updates. And of course, if you want to outsource the designing or the manufacturing of the parts, go ahead and click on the Lab Pronto button that you have on the screen to place that order. I'm going to be demonstrating the process flow from the software functionality point of view. If you have any comments or feedback, how it can improve clinically or design-wise, please don't hesitate to comment below. I'll show some tips and tricks along the way that you may or may not be aware of. So here's the data set that I have. You could simply select them and grab and drag them and drop them to load them into the BlueSkyPlan software. What comes up is our model alignment functionality. You see on screen the different STL files, and we're going to use the screen to orient the models and surfaces correctly in the software. Generally, the recommendation is to select the model on which you're going to be doing the restoration. Because of the state of this model, I'm going to select opposing arch, and I'm going to select the relevant jaw type, maxilla, dentate, and continue to alignment. I'm going to place 3 dots as per the illustration in the top right to create points that are going to be placed on the horizontal plane. Here we go, zooming in and out with my right mouse button, rotating with my left. The positioning of this on the graph seems to be pretty good. We have show grid right here. Now I'm going to click continue, and I could toggle on and off all of my other models as well. But I'm going to, at this point, fine-tune the positioning of this just by using the widget on screen. Rotating slightly with the widget. And let's say for our purposes, this is sufficient. The other models moved together with the model that I was orienting. And now I'm going to click Finish. So at this point, we could see that the orientation of the files that we brought in matches the head illustration that we have on the bottom left. Okay, now already at this point, we could go ahead and use the add a tooth functionality to place the teeth and start planning the prosthetic restoration. But let's move over first to align the scan bodies. And before we do that, you may or may not know, you could double click here the names of the surfaces and just type a new one in. So we could go ahead and just provide some context here. Okay, these are for the byte registrations that I just turned off. We could go into that a different time. And I'm going to make the scan bodies visible and click here. I'm in normal mode. We can see in the top I switched to normal mode. I'm going to browse to the relevant scan body. And if you find that the scan body or the prosthetics for the system that you're using is not in BlueSkyPlan, you can notify BlueSky Bio, of course, but also speak to the relevant company, ask them to send us the data, the relevant parts to put into the software. I'm not going to add a tooth at this time because we're going to add, there we go, because we're going to add the teeth together, and I'll show that in a minute. But what I've done right now is I've aligned the digital scan body to the scan body that we have in the model. And if needed, I can fine tune the placement. Another tip, you could just click and then using the arrows on the keyboard, just shift things over slightly, or just grab and drag. Okay, I'm going to do that again for the second scan body. Selecting it from the list. By the way, we have different companies here with scan bodies in the software. You also have the option of using an abutment as a scan body. So if the patient has a scan body in their mouth, you could click use abutment as a scan body, get to the scan body library, and just use that. Okay, I'm going to click OK. Left clicking again, aligning scan body. And I'm going to click cancel. I don't want to add a tooth at this point. And here we go, we have our scan bodies aligned. Okay, just to rewind a second, I'm going to show you, I'm going to delete this scan body, click remove, click add scan body again. And here, when I click OK, I do have the ability to add the scan body together with the abutment, the implant, and a tooth. So right now I could select the general small, medium, large size of the tooth. I could click here and select the implant and abutment that should be aligned as well. Click OK, click OK. And now we have the implant, abutment, and tooth that's placed. And that might have been a better way to do this, even though right now I'm going to go ahead and delete the tooth list, and delete the tooth, because we're going to place all three teeth together. So you know what, let's go ahead and do this here as well. I'm going to delete the scan body just to be able to place the scan body together with the abutment, implant, and tooth. Okay, implant and abutment is selected, click OK. Now we have it aligned, and again I'm going to delete the tooth. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I want to add all three teeth together. I'm going to switch over to crown and bridge. And here I'm going to click add teeth, select the relevant teeth. The one that's highlighted in red is going to be placed where I left click, and the other teeth will be placed accordingly. So here I see the tooth, and to place, simply click shift and left mouse button. And the advantage that I have by adding all three together is that now I could kind of move and orient them together using the widget right here. And I could switch over to my teeth edit panel and resize all the teeth together. And now I'm going to use my widget. Another kind of trick that I'll point out is we have these two sets of arrows. So obviously the big arrow moves everything together. The small arrow moves just the widget, so it realigns the point of rotation. So if I have my first tooth placed in the general ballpark, I can now change the pivot around that tooth. Okay, let's change the scale a bit more. And once I have the three placed generally in the right position, then I could go and I could modify the placement tooth by tooth. And the way to do that is to, in the teeth edit panel, click manipulate model. Now I could click and activate any of these teeth. Another trick, right click and you have toggle transparency. That makes things a bit see-through. I'll make this tooth larger. The adjacent tooth as well, I'm going to toggle transparency. What that does also is it locks the tooth that's transparent won't be moved, won't be modified. Okay. We can also go to the surfaces. Let's turn off our scan bodies. Alright, treat those, we could keep them on for now. Until we finalize and finish finalizing the positioning of the teeth. And I'll just point out, I'm not going to go into them in detail, that we have different editing tools for the teeth. So if you want to improve the design of the tooth, You could use the tools to smooth, add, remove material, local geometry transform, all sorts of different functionality that we have here to improve the tooth design. I'm just using the add material tool. Let's make it a bit stronger and a bit bigger to add some material to the tooth here. Shift and left clicking. I can also use my local geometry transform and kind of grab the side of the tooth here and just extend it outwards a bit. Okay, and I could continue to fine tune this to get the optimal tooth design and tooth positioning, but for our purposes, I'm going to continue. And what we're going to do now is we're going to turn the two teeth supported by titanium bases into crowns, and then we'll continue and create our bridge. Before we go ahead and do that, let's just actually turn on the opposing arch for a second. Let's turn off the scan bodies. And here we could, through the opposing arch, we could also use our editing tools to improve or modify our teeth shape. Okay, let's turn off. And again, we could work on improving the design of these. What I could also do is activate the closeness checkbox for the teeth and for the opposing arch. And here we could see our points of contact. Now I'm going to go to the restoration design panel. BlueSkyPlan is able to handle a situation like this. For example, if it's a single tooth, you don't need to place the tooth and design it first. If it's a single tooth or one or two teeth, then during the process of creating the crown for the tie base, the software will place the tooth and turn it into a crown. But if you're doing several adjacent teeth and you want to go ahead and place them together like we did now, then you could go ahead and do that as well. So the software can handle either option, either situation, either having the tooth placed before it's turned into a crown, or no need to do that and have the tooth and the crown created during the process. So I'm going to select crown on a tie base. I'm going to select the relevant jaw type, confirm the settings for this case, and click start. Step 1 of 5 is to define the path of insertion. So let's click actually from view. We'll do this with all of our teeth, or we could go ahead and use, actually let's go ahead and use the arrow here. And then click next. Now I'm going to check the checkbox here, do not modify crown shape of placement, assuming that we've placed all the teeth and designed all the teeth exactly how we want. So we don't want the software during this process to modify the shape or the placement. If it was a one crown case and we had adjacent teeth and we were able to define the proximal area, then we could go ahead and leave the box unchecked and the software will resize according to that. But in our situation, I'm going to click do not modify crown or shape replacement. I also don't have really, I guess I can mark here on the model. and then click next. I'm going to click the button project margin, and here we have initial placement of our margin curve. Holding down the shift key with my left mouse button, I just grab and drag to modify that. Okay, and once I am happy with my margin curve, then go ahead and click on next. At this step, I could go ahead and define the connection between the crown and the titanium base. We could grab and drag any of these nodes. We could go ahead and change as well the settings for the crown margin, for the titanium base margin, the minimal thickness, and the crown cement spacer. And of course, we have the checkbox here for create crown screw channel. So we're going to keep that checked. Click on next. Okay, the last step of creating this crown is if we want to cut the occlusal intersections or the proximal intersections. We could also fine tune the design once again. We still have that option using the editing tools to remove any intersections or anything else that we want to manually remove. And then we're going to click on next. Now at this point, if we go over to our teeth surfaces, we see that we have the tooth that was placed originally has been turned off. It's still here as a surface. It's been deactivated, and our designed tooth or our crown is now here and visible and activated. So just to show, if we unclick show implants, we can also turn off our surface, then we could see how we have designed the crown. And if we were just making a crown, then that would be the entire process. But let's go ahead and continue. Let's repeat the process for our other titanium base abutment. Start. I'm going to click next. Our proximal area, so I'll mark that. Next. Project margin. Next. Once again, we can modify the connection between the crown and titanium base. If we want to change any of the settings, we can change any of the settings. Click next. I'm going to uncheck the boxes again and click next. Okay, so now we have two crowns. We're going to repeat the process one last time for conventional crown. Mandible, first molar, antagonist, start. The process is slightly different here. I'm going to define the margin line just by placing dots, shift key and left clicking to place the dots. click next. Here's our crown, which we could once again change any of the design, add or remove material, anything we want to do. And once we've confirmed that the design of the crown is correct, then the software goes ahead and connects the crown to the base of the crown and creates our crown. I'm going to once again uncheck these. Okay, if we switch over to teeth surfaces, we have our individual crowns. If we want to, at this point, export them as individual crowns, then we're able to go ahead and do that. Or we could click Create Bridge. Now what happens when we create the bridge, first of all, obviously we'll be able to create the connections. Now the way that the bridge works, I'm just going to explain, is that if the teeth are touching, then the software merges them to create the bridge automatically. Here I left a tiny space between them, so we're going to create the connection. And what we see on the screen is the connection. So we're able to go ahead. I now went next to step 2. I could grab any of these nodes individually, or I could grab them all together. Now I'm grabbing the middle, and I can move it, or I could grab any of these if I want to increase the surface area. And again, we see the surface area and the amount of material and dimensions visible here on screen, dimensions and the amount, the volume of the connection. And here's the connection. So it might have been better strategy to actually make the teeth that touch each other, but allows me now to demonstrate the functionality of designing that connection. Okay, so before we finalize the bridge, we could use our editing tools. So if I want to actually now at this point make modifications, I could go ahead and do that. You can smooth things out here a bit. Add some material if we want. And then lastly is to define the path of insertion. We did it previously for the individual crowns. Now we can do it, and it's going to make a unified path of insertion, remove all the relevant undercuts. And then we click Next. And here we have our bridge. So if we go to our surface list, we could turn off. Okay, and here we have our bridge. Now this still, we could, if we wanted to continue and edit it further, we could simply select it and now use our editing tools. So if there's parts that we want to smooth out or make modifications to our final bridge before exporting it, then we could go ahead and do that. So we could use our smoothing tools or any other tools that we want here. Okay, and once we're done with all of this, we could go over to, we have an export button right here. Now exporting crowns and bridges from the BlueSkyPlan software is completely free. There is no charge. So that's an important point to know. Here we have a full list of our surfaces. If we're using SprintRay, Rayware, we could check the checkbox here to send it directly to the Rayware software. And we could select here what we want to export. Another interesting piece of information is essentially what's checked here by default is what's visible on screen. So if we only have the bridge visible when we go to export, then that's what's checked by default, although of course we could go ahead and change and include anything else or remove anything else that we do or we do not want exported. Now what we have here is the ability to export to an STL file, and we also have the ability to export to the CAM construction file if it's going to be milled. So if you want both the STL and the CAM construction file, simply have both of the checkboxes checked. If you have a lot of different things checked and you're exporting a lot of different things, then you should have this box, export separated files to a folder, and it's going to ask you where you want to save that folder, and then it's going to put everything inside of that folder. If you want to just save a particular file, you can uncheck that checkbox and click export. Let's put it on the desktop. Click save. And here also we could see, if I go to help about, that I still have the same number of exports remaining, 33.5, as I had previously. So we just did the export without using any credit, and there's no cost involved. Okay, here I have my exported bridge STL file. Here it is, and actually after I explained this checkbox of export separated files to a folder, I turned it off. Let's turn it back on again, because I'm exporting both the STL file and the CAM configuration file, and I want both of those to be exported directly to the same folder. So let's do this again. Again to my desktop, new folder, exported bridge. That's the name of my folder. I'm designating that it should export to that folder. Click OK. Okay, and here we go. So now this is the exported bridge folder that's on the desktop, and once again I have the STL file, but I also have the XML construction file that could be used for milling. So this video came out to be a bit longer than I had planned, but I hope you found it useful and informative.